Thank you so much again. It's a pleasure to be with you today. My name is Giulia Gasparri. I'm a consultant at Cambridge Economics Policy Associates, which is a consultancy, economics and policy consultancy firm based in London. I'm also a founding committee member of the Youth Climate and Health Alliance. And today I'll be talking about the hidden health crisis and how fossil fuels are threatening human health and what we can do about it. And I look forward to a very interesting discussion. In my presentation today, I'll cover three aspects. Firstly, I'll look at what are the health impacts of fossil fuels. Many here online may already know, but just to set the scene, it might be useful to go through these. Secondly, we'll look at what are the co-benefits of eliminating fossil fuels from our economy and phasing out fossil fuels. And then finally, I'll talk a bit about how civil society and youth specifically are holding the fossil fuel industry and governments accountable for increase in emissions. So starting from the very basics, the fossil fuel industry is the biggest contributor to greenhouse gas emissions that are responsible for heating our planet and contributing to the climate crisis. And these greenhouse gas emissions are mainly due to the burning of fossil fuels, which by fossil fuels we primarily mean coal, gas, and oil. And these are primarily burnt for power generation and to fuel our economy. So our electricity, our heating, transportation, manufacturing, production. And the emissions have been rising due to the increased use of fossil fuels since the Industrial Revolution, primarily due to human activities. One thing that is important to clarify is that not everyone is responsible, not every country is responsible in the same way for these emissions. Data shows that around 80% of the historical cumulative emissions actually come from G20 countries, primarily from the United States, Europe, and also increasingly China. And instead, least developed countries only contribute for around 4% of these emissions. And therefore, this leads to what is one of the greatest injustices of our times, that those who have contributed least to greenhouse gas emissions over the course of history, but also over the course of their lifetime, such as children and young people, are all actually the ones who will be most affected during their lifetimes. So how do fossil fuels harm human health? You can see from the figure here, there's a lot of ways in which fossil fuels can harm our health, specifically our lungs, our hearts, kidneys, brains, also our mental health. But to give you some examples, fossil fuels lead to air pollution, and data from the Lancet Countdown on Health and Climate Change shows that in 2021, fossil fuel burning was responsible for around 3.3 million deaths due to outdoor air pollution. At the same time, the use of dirty fossil fuels, for example, for cooking indoors, in 2020 caused around 2.3 million deaths worldwide. And we know that around 99% of the global population actually does not breathe clean air due to outdoor air pollution. Similarly, fossil fuels can also cause water pollution that then leads to for example, fracking, which is one of the ways to extract oil for our energy, uses around 1.5 million to 60 million gallons of water, and this can reduce in also contaminating groundwater and drinking water, therefore leading to toxic compounds entering our body. And then finally, climate change, which I've already mentioned before. This graph here shows a bit about how fossil fuels are fueling the climate crisis. Um, Essentially, fossil fuels are responsible for heating our planet, and this leads to increase extreme weather events, leads to increased risk of vector and waterborne disease spreading, increase in reduced food production, and this all has an impact in terms of our health outcomes. And you can see this at the bottom of the graph in terms of increasing injury and mortality from extreme weather events such as hurricanes, storms, floodings, heat-related illness, respiratory illnesses, increase in waterborne and vector-borne diseases, malnutrition, also increase in non-communicable diseases, and mental health and also psychological health. In addition to that, during extreme weather events, data shows that this can impact health facilities, for example, by causing road disruptions or eliminating energy that sort of powers health facilities. And this can then therefore be a danger in terms of health delivery in times of extreme need. Without going too much into detail, but I just want to give you some examples about increase in emissions due to fossil fuel burning are leading to heat-related mortality and morbidity. You can see here a graph that shows the projected increase of heat-related mortality by the mid-century. And overall, globally, heat-related deaths are projected to increase by 370% by mid-century. You can see from the graph that not every country is impacted in the same way. Similarly, this will lead to malnutrition, and it is expected that there will be 524 million additional people projected to experience moderate to severe food insecurity. And this will also cause labor loss due to heat making it impossible for people to work. And this is projected to increase by 50% by the mid-century. Now, looking at the increase in climate suitability for infectious disease transmission, there's already data showing that, for example, the suitability for transmission of malaria has increased in the last 50 years. And you can see here a graph that is showing this. Now, we've talked about how fossil fuels are harming our health, and now I'll go through what are the benefits of actually phasing out and therefore eliminating fossil fuels. What are the co-benefits for our health? You can see from the graph some of the examples here. So, for example, transitioning to clean household energy, low carbon electricity can improve clean air, and therefore it can improve our sort of also our mental health and lead to better social equity. Moving towards more healthy transport can also lead to better physical activities, such as, for example, increase in walking or cycling. But I would just wanted to give you some examples of how this actually translates in terms of the averted mortality and morbidity. So evidence shows that if we move to cleaner electrification of primary healthcare facilities, so for example, using solar systems, this can lead to powering life-saving medical devices. But if we did this for all health facilities across the world, in 63 countries from 2024, this could lead to 290,000 lives saved per year. Similarly, moving to cleaner household energy could avert around 133,000 deaths per year by 2030. Moving to cleaner and more sustainable transport systems and therefore encouraging the use of public transport, cycling, and walking can reduce air pollution, which we've seen before is a huge issue, but it can also promote physical activity. And this could save around 1.2 million premature deaths around the world due to physical inactivity. This can also help to reduce redesigning cities for clean transportation systems can also reduce traffic injuries, which are one of the leading causes of death of adolescents specifically. And then finally, and I'll talk about this in a few more slides, it is very important that to recognize that phasing out fossil fuel subsidies and actually taxing fossil fuels could also save lives by ensuring that there is more revenues for governments to then be spent on the healthcare system. However, despite these co-benefits, we are seeing that governments and companies are continuing to fueling the fire. When looking at the strategies of 114 largest oil and gas companies in 2024, and showing their projected emissions up to 2040, we see that actually their emissions will continue to surpass the levels that are consistent with the Paris Agreement by 189%. And the Paris Agreement is the objective that globally countries have agreed to meet by to tackle and mitigate greenhouse gas emissions to avoid dangerous climate change. Similarly, we are seeing that in 2022, 72 countries across the world still promoted fossil fuels through net subsidies, and the total amount is equivalent globally to 1.4 trillion US dollars, which is a huge amount, and this amount could actually be used instead to address other issues, to address specifically the climate crisis. And out of these countries, 23 countries actually spend more in terms of subsidizing fossil fuels than on healthcare. In addition to that, we are seeing an increase in the past years in terms of fossil fuel greenwashing. What does this mean? This means that fossil fuel companies are paying and using their marketing strategies to either in the past manufacture doubts about climate change, or nowadays showing that they're actually doing things to address the issue, whilst in reality their emissions are not decreasing. So, for example, ExxonMobil, a big fossil fuel company, has funded around 31 million to organizations to manufacture doubts about climate change. And similarly, research shows that when we look at some of the strategies of these companies, we are seeing an increase in language around the need to address climate change, around their commitment to a clean energy transition. But however, their business models continue to be very dependent on the extraction of fossil fuels. And we're seeing an increase actually in exploration of new fossil fuels rather than a decrease in the use of fossil fuels. Now, going into the last part of my section, so what can we do about this, and what are some examples across the world and globally of how civil society and young people specifically are actually taking action to hold the industry and governments accountable for their lack of reduction of emissions and the continuing extraction of fossil fuels? We're seeing many examples around the world of how youth are really stepping up to address this issue. We've seen many young people leading civil society protests across the world in every country. For example, with the Fridays for Future movement led by a group of school children starting from Sweden. We've seen young people filing litigation in national courts, such as, for example, in Australia, Canada, Colombia, Mexico, India, Pakistan, and other countries to hold governments accountable. We're also seeing young people filing lawsuits against fossil fuel industries. There's an example of a group of young people in the Netherlands who have sued the company Shell for the lack of emission reductions. And specifically from the Youth and Climate Health Network, which I'm part of, a lot of young people are specifically focusing their advocacy on the health argument to phase out fossil fuels because of the devastating consequences that fossil fuels have on our human health. Another example that I wanted to bring to you today is the example of a group of students from the Pacific Islands who came together to bring a campaign to persuade the Pacific Island leaders to take the issue of climate change and the breach that the fossil fuels essentially are having in terms of breaching our human rights to the International Court of Justice. And they managed actually, thanks to their advocacy essentially led to the UN General Assembly adopting a resolution in March 2023 on the need for countries to essentially assess what are the obligations of states in relation to climate change, specifically for the rights of children, but also the rights of future generations. And this issue is now in discussion at the International Court of Justice. Um, Thanks to this increasing advocacy in the past years, youth are now widely recognized as agents for change in terms of specifically addressing the climate crisis. One of the examples is that we've seen in the COP27 final declaration that it recognizes actually children and youth as agents for change and requests government and stakeholders to meaningfully engage and include children and young people in climate change policies and processes. However, at the same time, in the past few years, we are seeing an increase in pushback both from private companies and also governments to try to shut down these protests and the agency of young people. For example, we are seeing a lot of big polluters, big fossil fuel corporations increasing the use of SLAPs, which are strategic lawsuits against public participation. And they're used essentially as a mechanism by fossil fuel companies to silence and stop climate and environmental defenders to actually protest basically against them. This then requires activists to then be engaged in heavily expensive legal battles that sometimes obviously are quite unaffordable compared to the power that the market power that fossil fuel companies have. In addition to young people, there's also many other communities who are really advocating for addressing and ensuring that fossil fuel corporations actually take action. I wanted to bring you an example today from the health community Break the Fossil Fuel Industry campaign that has been recently been launched. And essentially, this campaign aims to ensure that health organizations lead by example by stopping to work with agencies or other corporations and partners who actually work for the fossil fuel industry. And I'll just play a short video and now so that you can hear more about the campaign. I hope you can hear the sound. Please stop me if it doesn't work.
Fossil fuels are making people sick, and
yes, we can hear the sound.
Are helping polluters hide the truth using the same playbook they had for big tobacco.
Fossil fuels pollute our air and water, contribute to the climate crisis, and endanger life.
As health professionals, we're trained to protect life, not partner with those who endanger it.
That's why we're joining the Break the Fossil Influence campaign.
To demand fossil-free health communications, we're calling on every health organization.
Don't work with public relation or advertisement firms that also work for the fossil fuel industry.
It's another step to align our communications with our mission to improve the health of the peoples of the world.
Just like we stood up to big tobacco, now it's the time to step up to the fossil fuel industry.
And by so doing, we will force them to make the right choice. And the right choice is the choice for health and for healthy communities.
Let's break the fossil influence because health comes first.
Thank you so much. I hope that this was informative and mainly just some take-home messages from my presentation today. So firstly, we've seen how fossil fuels are negatively impacting human health and increasing mortality and morbidity, and that the populations that are most effective are actually those who are least responsible for fossil fuel emissions. We've also seen how phasing out fossil fuels will lead to many co-benefits for human health. And what are the opportunities, for example, to build sustainable cities and transport systems that are actually powered by clean energy. We've also seen the danger of washing, and the commercial practices that the fossil fuel industries is putting in place, which actually serves to promote their own business interests in direct conflict with the public health goals. And finally, we've seen how civil society and youth are actually holding the industry and governments accountable across the world, and that there's many opportunities to join these initiatives. I hope this was useful. I have some few questions in case we have time. In terms of like some examples from you, I would like to hear from you some examples from your community of how fossil fuel industry is being held accountable and how young people specifically are being engaged and what are some of the barriers. But just again, thank you so much for listening to this presentation, and back to the organizers. Thank you.